working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. Joining me today is from our EBC Vietnam Bureau. Hello, Eliana.
Hello, Alma. And good afternoon to all of our viewers this afternoon. I'm Eliana Faith with the Sun from EBC Vietnam Bureau, giving you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. President Duterte said he realized the importance of testing to stop the transmission of COVID-19, and that's why he wants the government to shoulder COVID-19 tests in public facilities.
Deputy Prime Minister Budut Lam said the newly emerged COVID-19 cluster enforcement has been basically put under control.
Budget carrier Cebu Pacific President and Chief Executive Officer Lance Gokongwei said he believes a COVID-19 immunity passport is essential, especially as the country opens up international travel.
So that everybody...
Vietnamese 19th century outfits do not seem a perfect fit for life in the country's hectic and sweaty modern cities, but 28-year-old entrepreneur Nguyen Duclos and his 11th farm production team and son are convinced that the attire of their ancestors can make a return to modern-day living.
President Duterte said he realized the importance of testing to stop the transmission of the coronavirus, and that's why he wants the government to shoulder the expenses of COVID-19 tests and in public facilities. Take a look.
Alam mo, ang importante pala, sa totoo lang, na I realize now, it's the testing. Yung swabbing, pati yung test. Kasi mahal, I'm trying to figure out a cheaper way of doing it. And I will discuss it with the Secretary of Health and General Galvez, how to come up with a cheaper swabbing and testing. Kasi magbayad nga mahal lalo na sa airport. Ang problema noon in the early days ang sa airport, which was really a mandatory thing for me, na nagpunta doon, ang presyo ata mga to, so yung iba, tama-tama lang yung pera, especially the marginalized. Marginalized, I mean, yung tama-tama lang. Mga estudyante. So, pamasahe pa uwi, airport, they never really content with the extra expenses. So yeah, yun ang problema. Dapat if we are to really avoid and limit the virus, government itself must provide for the curative and palliative or whatever, preventive. And one of those is really the swabbing, para maraman ka. So, I leave it to the city government and we will talk about it later. Itong mga hotel na bakante, total pagkatapos yan, you can always decontaminate the rooms. We will do it for you. Arrange with the hotels na pwede mo munang gamitin, lalo na sa panahon na ito. And to the owners of hotels, inns, motel maybe kung wala ng iba, nagkulang, to accommodate the Filipinos who are in need of help. I will assume the full responsibility of paying you pagdating ng panahon. I will see to it that I will ask Congress. I will plead sa kanila na hanapan ng paraan, bayaran kayo. And I will personally see to it that you are paid on time. This would include siguro meals, but simple lang. Kagaya dito, I recommend the menu dito sa Malacanang. Dito magkain ka, isang sabaw, isang ulam, pati kanin. Hanggang dyan lang makuha mo dito na pagkain.
Malacanang on Sunday tagged as fake news the rumors that the government would impose a nationwide lockdown from December 23, 2020 to January 3, 2021. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque denied that there have been any changes to the quarantine classifications announced by President Rodrigo Duterte last November 30.
Kritiko at detractor sa administrasyon ay patuloy. Ngunit ang mga kritiko at detractor sa administrasyon ay patuloy sa pagkakalat ng peking balita para sirain ang Pasko ng mga Pilipino. Isang fake news ang kanilang pinakalat nitong weekend kung saan sinabi na magkakaroon daw ng nationwide lockdown ngayong Kapaskuhan. Malayo ito po sa katotohanan. Una, naglabas na po ng community quarantine classification ang pamahalaan para sa buong buwan ng Disyembre. At mismong si Presidente ang nag-anunsyo nito noong Lunes sa kanyang Talk to the People address. Ang susunod na quarantine classification ay ilalabas pa po sa susunod na buwan ng Enero. Naintindihan natin ang agam-agam ng iba sa atin. No? Nakita natin ang pagdagsa ng mga tao sa mga tiyangge at ibang pamilihan. At kung hindi ito magbabago, asahan ang pagdabi ng bagong kaso ng COVID-19. Alam naman natin na unti-unting binubuksan ng ating ekonomiya at sa pagbubukas na ito, kinakailangan balansehin ang kaligtasan ng mamamayan at economic health. Ipatutupad ang isang granular or localized lockdown. Yan na po talaga ang pulisiya ng IATF. Ang magpapatupad dito ay ang local government units. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng granular or localized lockdown? I-restrict ang isang specific area tulad ng isang household, isang compound o isang kalye kung saan ang mga residente ay na-expose o maaring na-expose sa coronavirus. Tulad ng madalas kong sabihin dito sa ating press briefing, kinakailangang matuto tayong mabuhay na narariyan pa ang virus sa pamamagitan ng pag-iingat buhay para sa hanap buhay. At paano natin to iingatan? Mask, hugas, iwas. At para hindi tayo ma-fake news, kinakailangan suriin natin ang ating nakukuhang impormasyon, lalo na kung ito ay magdudulot ng alarma, pangamba, takot at stress. Ulitin ko po, fake news yung kumakalat na lockdown daw sa panahon ng Pasko.
Duterte earlier announced that Metro Manila, the provinces of Batangas and Lanao del Sur, Davao del Norte, and cities of Iloilo, Tacloban, Iligan, and Davao will remain under General Community Quarantine or GCQ until December 31. The rest of the country will be under the least stringent modified general community quarantine or the MGCQ. The Department of Health, DOH, has repeatedly advised the public to observe minimum public health standards during the holidays. Currently, hosting and attending large in-person gatherings and even traveling is not advised amid the prevailing pandemic. DOH spokesperson Maria Rosario Bridger has urged the public to consider modifying their holiday activities or resorting to virtual activities to mitigate the spread of the virus, particularly in enclosed spaces and with an exceeding number of attendees from the recommended limit. He recommended getting together exclusively with household members and virtual gathering with those not residing in the same house, as most infections are made through close contact and prolonged exposure.
The purchase of coronavirus disease vaccines for Filipinos will be free from corruption. with vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. in charge. President Duterte assured on Monday night. The president said he had full faith and confidence that Galvez will make sure that there won't be any kickbacks involved in the process of acquiring the vaccines. The president also defended Health Secretary Francisco Duque against corruption allegations anew, saying he was sure that the latter never received any money. Let's listen in.
Tanggap ng pera, tinanong ko sino, sabihin ko sa inyo. Sabihin ninyo sa akin. Wala talaga. Either sa intelligence, sa military, sa police, o sa civilian. I have not heard Secretary Duque receiving money. Yung vaccine na yan, it's worth billions. They say that we would need about 73 billion to vaccinize the population. Yan, teritoryo yan ni General Galvez. I have full faith and confidence that walang kickback yan, wala lahat. It will be a clean straight deal. Whatever be the vaccine. Walang makikialam. Siya lang, kasi sinabi ko, siya lang ang kakana niyang itong vaccine para sa ating mga kababayan.
He said as far as he is concerned, his cabinet members were all honest. Otherwise, he would ask them to resign immediately. The president said there's no use of governing a country when people no longer believe in their leaders.
Let's get the latest coronavirus situation in Cambodia from Crystal Ann Ballesteros. Hello, Crystal.
Hi, Eliana. Good afternoon. And to all our online viewers. In Cambodia, Prime Minister Hun Sen reaffirmed today that the kingdom will not declare a state of emergency for the November 28 community incident because it will paralyze the country's economy. In his voice message released today, Mr. Hun Sen said he had already drafted a royal decree and a letter to be sent to King Norodom Sihamoni and sub-decrees and letters for the National Assembly and Senate presidents over a declaration of the state of emergency. But he does not want to do so because the national economy will be completely paralyzed. If we lock down the country or any part of the country, such as Phnom Penh, or any province, it will hit the economic process, he said, adding that authorities should work hard to prevent the outbreak with concerted participation by all people. If the law be enforced, the government would have the right to impose several measures, including the prohibition or restriction of freedom of movement, right to freedom of gathering of people and work or occupation. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Hun Sen has given recommendations on the first group to receive the vaccinations against COVID-19 pandemic in the first phase of 1 million doses. In a voice clip Monday night, Mr. Hun Sen said, medical staff is the high-risk group to get the COVID-19 vaccine first, followed by teachers, armed forces, prison officers, justice officers, and the students, both public and private universities and at vocational schools, construction workers, and other workers could be the targets in the next phase in which 2 to 3 million doses will be purchased. The Inter-Ministerial Committee to Combat COVID-19 will discuss the issue today via video conferencing. This evening, the Prime Minister announced to set aside some budget to buy 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines for the first stage to provide for the higher risk and risk groups free of charge. But 1 million doses can be used only with 500,000 people, while the population of Cambodia is about 16 million, both children and adults. Therefore, around 10 million people need vaccines. According to the Prime Minister, Cambodia is building a warehouse to store vaccines at the low temperature of up to 80 degrees Celsius. That's the latest news here in Cambodia. Back to you, Eliana.
All right, thank you for your updates, Crystal. Stay safe and stay healthy.
You too, Eliana. Reporting live here in Cambodia, I am Crystal Ann Ballesteros, and we live in interesting times.
Now let's go over to Vietnam where Micah Gwyneth Apostle joins us live. Hello, Micah.
Hello, Eliana. Good afternoon and good afternoon to everyone. This is the latest news from Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh City Legislature to wrap up year by discussing economic recovery in 2021. A resolution on budget revenues and expenditure and discussion of the city's economic recovery plans for 2021 is set to pass by the year-end Ho Chi Minh City People's Council that was opened yesterday. Nguyen Phi Le, its chairwoman, stated that the city and country's efforts to reach socio-economic targets is affected by the uncertain situation of COVID-19 worldwide and in Vietnam. But she, however, mentioned that the People's Committee had plans in place for economic recovery next year. As drastic measures have been taken to control the pandemic, recovery and socio-economic development became possible. The city's economic growth remaining at a positive state this year with 1.39%. She, although, emphasized that the city should continue to remain on guard. In addition, she mentioned that public problems should be addressed. Les stated that critical issues such as construction-related violations, flooding, traffic congestion, accidents, social order, and safety remain problematic, giving highlights to issues concerning drug crimes. At the opening, that the proposal to create the new Thu Duc City was anticipated to be approved by the National Assembly Standing Committee on December 9, said by the Vice Chairman of National Assembly, Wong Chu Lu. To create an innovation hub tentatively called Thu Duc City, the People's Council recently passed a resolution to merge the city's eastern districts of Thu, Nine, and Thu Duc into one administrative unit. The People's Council will consider proposal by the People's Committee, such as the issuance of fees for the use of public infrastructure works and utilities at seaport border gates, and rename 224 roads after Vietnamese heroic mothers, famous scientists, and cultural and historical events. It will also review proposals such as a sustainable poverty alleviation program in 2021 to 2025, organization of yearly cultural festival events, establishment of office of the National Assembly delegation and Ho Chi Minh City People's Council, and others. Back to you, Eliana.
Thank you for your update there, Micah. Stay alert and you take care always.
Thank you, Eliana, reporting live from Da Nang, Vietnam. This is Micah Gwyneth Apostle. We live in interesting times.
Deputy Prime Minister Vu Doc Dam, still in Vietnam, said that the newly emerged COVID-19 cluster in Ho Chi Minh has been basically put under control. 48 hours after the detection of a community infection case in Ho Chi Minh City on November 1, authorities were able to track down all the people who are either F1 and F2 of patient 1347 for quarantining and testing, according to Dam, adding that this is the great improvement in the capacity of the government in curbing the pandemic. However, Mr. Dam, who is head of the National Committee for COVID-19 Prevention and Control, stressed the need to continue tightening measures as the winter nears, and the pandemic is still evolving complicatedly around the world. Now, so far, Vietnam has confirmed 1,367 COVID cases, including 693 local infections, and this means preventing infection risk from outside is still the most important task, as more flights will continue to be arranged to repatriate Vietnamese citizens stranded abroad due to COVID-19.
Manila Mayor Isko Moreno has warned to place the entire city under strict lockdown if the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases would spike due to violations on health protocols. In a report on PTV News, the verbal warning was issued following reported violations on wearing of face masks and social distancing protocols in crowded areas despite repeated prompting by the local government. Due to crowding in Divisoria, safety measures were doubled and ropes were placed as separators along Elias Street to prevent convergence of shoppers. Minors are still not allowed to leave their homes unless needed. Meanwhile, the local government has launched no-contact apprehension policy between enforcers and motorists. 36 cameras were installed to support the Manila Traffic and Parking Bureau's monitoring on violators of traffic laws.
Still in the Philippines, in Baguio, the city government will reopen the night market this week with an improved and stricter system in complying with health and safety protocols. Mayor Benjamin Magalong on Monday assured a balance between economic activity and compliance with the guidelines to assure public safety in this time of the pandemic. The number of stalls would be reduced to 30% from the original 1,067 stalls on the whole stretch of one side of the Harrison Road. To accommodate all the original sellers, they will sell alternately in different weeks to give everyone a chance to earn during the holiday season, according to Mr. Magalong. Entry and exit points at the night market will also be controlled, even as the vendors themselves committed to observe and help implement the safety protocols inside the venue. Food sellers will be situated in the parking area with a separate space for diners. Police and members of the city's Public Order and Safety Division will be deployed to oversee compliance to the wearing of masks and face shield and the observance of social distancing. Earlier this month, Baguio City government was criticized for the breach of health protocols during the resumption of night market activities last December 1, which also coincided with the opening of the holiday celebrations in Baguio. Now, this prompted Mr. Magalong to suspend the operation of the night market and to refine their strategies. Mr. Magalong said the city, like any other local government unit, is learning to cope with the new normal and continues to do a balancing act between reopening the economy and protecting the people from the virus.
Hello there. Imagine Dami got the virus and she infected 2 more. And those 2 infected a lot more of people. And it goes on and on until it became an epidemic. But what if Dami stayed at home? Then those 2 wouldn't have contracted the virus. Then those people would have not been infected. This is not just your battle, it's everyone's, and you can be a huge help. Follow social distancing, or better yet, stay at home.
Welcome back. The head of the World Health Organization said as countries plan to roll out COVID-19 vaccines in the coming days, weeks, and months, health workers and other at-risk populations should be prioritized for the vaccination. The recommendations are based on the so-called Values Framework and Population Prioritization Roadmap issued by a WHO advisory group of immunization. Take a look.
As countries plan to roll out vaccines in the coming weeks and months, we urge them to prioritize vaccinating those most in need, based on the values framework and population prioritization roadmap issued by WHO Strategic Advisory Group of Experts on Immunization. These documents provide recommendations on who should be considered for vaccination first and lays out the values that inform those recommendations. These are not easy decisions. Vaccinating health workers who are at high risk of infection will help to protect them and the health system. People at highest risk of serious disease or death as a result of age are also a high priority group because protecting them will reduce severe disease and death and take the burden off health systems.
Actually, there are very few cases where vaccines are mandatory in countries because countries have different regulations and they usually refer to vaccination in children. We don't have that experience with adults so far, but we do believe that it's much better to work on information campaigns, on making the vaccine accessible to those priority groups who need to be vaccinated first, as we don't have enough vaccine next year to vaccinate the entire population. So it will be up to countries to decide, but the position is that the way it works better is to make sure that people who are in the priority populations to be vaccinated first, that they have the right information and that they can do an informed choice regarding getting the vaccine.
I think the issue and the discussion we need to have amongst ourselves, with ourselves, is the issue of what is personal responsibility versus what is a requirement of law. And what are you as an individual willing to do to protect yourself and those people around you? Would I be, if I lived on a desert island, would I necessarily want to have a COVID vaccine? I don't know. But if I was going to visit my 80-year-old mother, she's not in the nursing home, but if she was, would I, if vaccine was available, would I be responsible in going in there, visiting lots of older people without being vaccinated, if a vaccine was available to me? So I think we all have to ask ourselves those questions. And that's when you ask yourself those questions, you tend to come up with the right answers. And then you avoid questions about law and mandatory natures of vaccines. I think the other thing that Maria reflected to me earlier was, you know, the reality is most people want these vaccines. This is a massive potential victory for global health. People are demanding these vaccines. People want these vaccines. They want these vaccines to be rolled out carefully and safely. There are specific circumstances in which governments may have to require specific mandates for vaccination. But I think all of us who work in public health would rather avoid that as a means of getting people vaccinated. I think we're much better served to present people with the data, present people with the benefits, and let people make up their own minds, obviously within reason, because there are certain circumstances, as I've alluded to, where I would believe that it would be the only responsible thing would be to be vaccinated in future when the vaccine is fully available. But what we need now globally is not to enter the land of empty promises in terms of supporting the ACT Accelerator. The structure is there, the partnership is there, the means to do this, allocation fairly and equitably, is there. We've never had that in place previously, but what's not in place is the financing to make that happen in 2021.
According to the WHO's overview of different candidate vaccines, 51 have entered human trials, 13 of which have reached final stage mass testing. A further 163 candidate vaccines are being developed in laboratories with a view to eventual human testing. The world first rollout of the Pfizer vaccine is due to begin in Britain today.
Global food commodity prices rose sharply in November, reaching their highest level in nearly 6 years. The Food and Agriculture Organization, or the FAO of the United Nations, reported on Thursday The average value of the FAO Food Price Index, which reflects monthly changes in international prices for basic foodstuffs, was 105.0 points in November, which is 3.9% higher than in October and 6.5% more than in 2019. According to a report published on the organization's website, the food price index reached its highest value since 2014. The FAO cereal price index rose by 2.5% compared to October, sugar by 3.3%, and meat by 0.9%. It was noted that the FAO dairy price index increased by 0.9% and reached an almost 18-month high. The organization also listed factors that threaten global food security, including the coronavirus disease 2019 or the COVID-19 pandemic, hurricanes in Central America, and floods in Africa.
In other news, President Duterte said he will not declare a ceasefire ever again with the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army National Democratic Front, or CPP-NPA-NDF, for the rest of his term. The president made the remarks 4 days after the Armed Forces of the Philippines said it is not inclined to recommend any truce with the CPP-NPA this holiday season. In his speech last week, President said the Armed Forces of the Philippines does not engage in red-tagging leftist lawmakers but was actually identifying them as legal fronts. He said the AFP is very correct for identifying groups like Bayan, Makabayan, and Gabriela as legal fronts of CPP-NPA.
The Cambodian government has taken additional measures to curb the country's latest outbreak of COVID-19, including giving power to provincial and municipal authorities to close shops not adhering to public health protocols, imposing a mandatory 14-day quarantine for travelers entering the country, and controversial moves such as publishing the names of people infected with the coronavirus. These measures come on the heels of the first cases of a community transmission, dubbed the November 28 incident, after Cambodian General Director of Prisons PHHEM Savut, his wife, and several family members tested positive for COVID-19. The incident led the government to again close schools in the capital of Phnom Penh and limit gatherings to no more than 20 people. According to Devix News, WHO Cambodia country representative Dr. Lee Ailan voiced concerns about the latest outbreak, saying the country is not fully prepared for a large-scale community transmission. While Cambodia has reported only a small volume of cases, 348 as of Monday, compared with its neighboring countries, and 0 deaths from COVID-19, large-scale community transmission could put pressure on its health system. Prior to this latest outbreak, the country had a COVID-19 scare in which government officials, including the Prime Minister, went into quarantine after Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Zitario, who visited the country on November 3, tested positive for COVID-19. The World Health Organization congratulated Cambodia for managing that crisis, but now the head of the United Nations Health Agency in the country is once again emphasizing the need for mass individual action and a speedy response.
Budget carrier Cebu Pacific President and Chief Executive Officer Lance Gokongwei said he believes the COVID-19 immunity passport is essential, especially as the country is opening up international travel. In a briefing with presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, Mr. Gokongwei said there are many vaccines and thus there has to be a global passport or global COVID passport showing that a person has been vaccinated by a credible vaccination source that every country would respect and recognize. Take a look.
I think we do think that's essential, no? Especially as we open up international travel. Na daming different vaccines, and each, I think we have to work on a global COVID passport, no? So that each country respects the passport and recognizes that if you do have this COVID passport, that you have already been vaccinated by a credible vaccination source. No? So I think this has to be led at the G2G basis, but definitely I think it's essential for if the tourism and travel industries to recover. This is an absolute necessity. No?
Mr. Gokong Wei, also President and Chief Executive Officer of conglomerate JG Summit Holdings Incorporated, said the carrier is working with local government units as it respects each LGU's own guidelines or travel requirements. The CEB recently partnered with the local government of General Santos in providing the antigen test for passengers. CEB has been providing its Jensan-bound passengers a free antigen test since December 3 and until December 14.
AirAsia Group is focusing on expanding its base in Southeast Asia and is in discussions about starting 3 new airlines in the region, Chief Executive Officer Tony Fernandez said in an interview on Bloomberg Television. According to Bangkok Post, Fernandez expects air travel to return to pre-COVID levels in the next 6 to 12 months. People want to travel and demand is there, which is the most important thing, he said. Thailand's domestic market, for example, is already back to pre-COVID level and will be ahead of it by the end of December, he said. Fares will remain largely the same. AirAsia is applying for digital banking licenses in Malaysia and 2 other countries in Southeast Asia. Its remittance business has been growing 50% a month, Fernandez said, adding that the company will start lending in Malaysia in January and is also working on insurance on wealth management. He said AirAsia X is more of a medium-haul airline rather than a long haul, and it has a good future.
The acting U.S. Secretary of Defense met with his counterpart in Indonesia on Monday. This is part of a visit to Asia in which he will push Washington's free and open Indo-Pacific policy. Mr. Christopher Miller met Indonesian Minister of Defense Prabowo Subianto on Monday. And according to the office of Mr. Prabowo, the Pentagon has said during his trip that Miller will meet with his counterparts and other senior officials to discuss the importance of the bilateral defense relationships and securing a free and open Indo-Pacific. After Indonesia, Miller will head to the Philippines. Miller was installed by President Trump on November 9 after he fired then Defense Secretary Mark Esper.
Says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
Final volume 450. FI on to 100%. Standing by. Suctioning.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. And now here's the quick lesson from Bitcoin from our EBC New York Bureau, Bobby Soriano, tells us what it is and how it works. Bobby?
The safety. You may have heard about it in passing. The next big investment opportunity, some might say. Others call it the next big bubble ready to burst. And others simply think of it as a scam. Whatever others may think of it, EBC Business is here to present to you the facts on one of the most controversial financial instruments of our time, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a form of cryptocurrency. Much like the US dollar, the Philippine peso, or the British pound, one Bitcoin has a monetary value attached to it where it can be then used to purchase or sell goods where Bitcoin is accepted. Similar to paper currency having many different forms and values, there are also many different forms and values of cryptocurrency. But Bitcoin is the most recognized and most valuable of them all. This leads to the next obvious question: what gives Bitcoin its value? This is probably the most difficult question to answer because much like regular paper currency, many things can affect the value of Bitcoin. How much of it is in supply, its current demand, and how it is being regulated. Supply of Bitcoin is the easiest to analyze because there's actually a set amount of it. Many people have the misconception that because Bitcoin is digital, anyone can make more of it. The truth of the matter, however, is that its creator, who remains unknown to this day, set the total amount of Bitcoin that is actually possible to be in circulation at 21 million Bitcoins. The limit of Bitcoin is permanent and is enforceable through the use of blockchain technology. Bitcoin is decentralized, meaning to say it cannot be manipulated by any single government entity. Without going too far into the topic of how Bitcoin supply changes, think of it in the same way as gold. There is a finite amount of gold in the world, miners discover new gold, and that new supply has an impact on the value of gold. For Bitcoin, digital miners discover new Bitcoins, and that new supply is added into circulation. Blockchain technology, which is beyond the scope of this introduction, is what allows every single Bitcoin in circulation to be properly accounted for so that no one single Bitcoin owned by one person can be fraudulently used or counterfeit by another. The safety and security of knowing that every Bitcoin was safely accounted for in a public, uneditable ledger propelled Bitcoin to stratospheric levels of valuation as more and more entities adopted its use throughout the world. The first ever Bitcoin transaction was recorded in 2010, when 10,000 Bitcoins were used to purchase 2 pizzas. Fast forward to December 17, 2017, when 1 Bitcoin reached a record high of $19,783. While a Bitcoin itself is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to counterfeit, that's not to say hackers could not find workarounds. Rather than attempting to counterfeit the currency itself, there were several very public instances where hackers directly attacked the cryptocurrency exchanges that helped to circulate Bitcoin, with millions of dollars worth of Bitcoins transferred from these exchanges to anonymous accounts. The cryptocurrency also began to gain notoriety for being used to purchase illegal substances, with online vendors of illegal substances bypassing federal laws on transacting with paper currency by making Bitcoin the preferred currency. These high-profile hacks and dubious uses, along with many countries beginning to prohibit vendors within their borders from accepting the use of Bitcoin, would lead to its quick collapse in value. By January of 2019, the value of Bitcoin had collapsed to $3,747, a decrease in value of 81% from its all-time high in December of 2017. That wouldn't be the end of Bitcoin's story, however. Slowly but surely, major financial entities began looking at Bitcoin once more as an alternative asset to invest in, especially as other assets were losing value in the new pandemic economy. Cryptocurrency exchanges became more secured in processing transactions. The Intercontinental Exchange, owner of the NYSE, made investing in Bitcoin less riskier by developing Bitcoin futures and options that would allow an investor to gain a profit even if a drastic drop in price were seen again. Major transaction corporations, such as PayPal, also developed tools to allow US users to safely buy, hold, or sell Bitcoin on their platform. All of these moments would help to stabilize the value of Bitcoin once more, and on November 30th, 2020, almost 3 years after reaching an all-time high, the cryptocurrency reached a new record high of $19,860. It remains to be seen whether Bitcoin can maintain its resurgence. While its acceptance is more widespread now with better risk controls in place, its adoption is still being met with skepticism, particularly by governments that do not want to see a decentralized Bitcoin overtake their own national currency. These governments, however, may only be slowing down the inevitable, with researchers reporting more than 2.9 million unique cryptocurrency wallets already taking part in the digital currency revolution. Reporting from New York, Bobby Soriano, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you, Eliana, for joining me today.
Thank you, Alma, and that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau. We live in interesting times.
And I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back tomorrow. We live in interesting times.